Right now, everybody is talking about cryptocurrency, and the cybercriminals are hiding in the conversation. Cybercriminals use social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on your company, your employees, and your customers. Spear phishing is just one of 13 types of email threats. Barracuda has identified these 13 types and shows you how you can protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Find out about the 13 email threat types and Barracuda email protection. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Don't forget to check out a library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings. You got Understanding Blockchain, Crypto, NFT, Smart Contracts, and Web 3.0. Also, we did a really great one on do-it-yourself building a security lab at home. All that is available and more on securityweekly.com/on-demand. We have added Mr. Lee Neely to the show. Lee, welcome.
Oh, great to be here. And, it's the first time. It feels like it's been since last year since I've seen you all.
I know,
it's
right?
even better.
Lee, do you play a lot of Roblox? You played Roblox before? No? Anyone played Roblox?
Roadblocks? No.
Roblox.
Roblox. My kids both play it.
Yes.
And I didn't get a chance to read the article, but just the title was fascinating.
Yes. I have to go back and read it's a really long article. And I read probably 50-60% of it, kind of skipped around to get the gist because it's like really detailed into the really what is a cesspool so I'm like, how did this become a cesspool? So I pulled up some interesting things. 43 million players log into Roblox every day. Countless kids rely on the service to keep them connected with their friends during dog days of summer and the pandemic. So it's strange to hear parents compare the game to a prison yard, which is what they describe their daughter as like now she's in control of the prison yard because scams and fraud is so rampant on the platform, which, I mean, being host of 43 million players, I'd say the majority of which are under 15 years old. That's just my kind of educated guess. So it says, the author of the article talked to the flippers, gamblers, and hustlers of the Roblox underworld. This is a game for kids, mind you. And we're using terms like hustlers and underworld to describe it. And they say, I do wonder if the Roblox Corporation understands the responsibility that comes when your player base is composed of innocent children, mostly are playing this game.
And arguably, it's a little bit more than a game. It's it's a platform so that you can develop your own games within a framework.
And your own artifacts to go along with your player.
Yep.
Right? That cost money in the real world, which is how they're scamming. They've got they talked about a script that can brute force PIN numbers that
to unverify email addresses.
Thank you. That was the phrase I was looking for. Unverify email addresses and basically wipe out all of your paid for artifacts in the game. What do you call those in Roblox? The artifacts that you play.
Robux.
Robux.
Well,
Robux is the currency.
Currency, yeah. Sorry, the artifacts, I don't know.
The widgets, I don't know what the right term is in Roblox. In Fortnite, they might call it something else. Tyler, help me out because I know your kids play this.
I don't know the terms, man. I just look at the content and it's all shit.
I mean, for
let's
Tyler,
be real. They're not wrong.
For Tyler, for us, yeah, absolutely. The games are shit. But you think about some of the games I've seen our kids play, like the games harken back to like the old school games that we played as kids, like Pitfall.
Oh, the games aren't shit. I mean, they're weird, but they're like, it's like Minecraft, right? Like,
yeah,
but the content inside of there and the little shits that run around in that damn game, like, I want to backhand all of them.
Yes.
Yep. Cosmetics.
Thank you. Is what.
How do you really feel, Tyler? Dear God.
I am not a fan. There's no way to secure that game. You can't secure the comms. You can't stop crap in that game. Like, I literally
is that Roblox? Are you talking Roblox or Fortnite or both?
Both.
Fortnite seems to be a little better, but I wonder what.
Fortnite's actually not too bad. Epic Games has done a pretty decent job with some of their security and some of the controls that you can put as a parent, especially leveraging Microsoft Store and some of the parental guidance.
Yeah, and they have Fortnite has an anti. Is Fortnite a kernel level anti cheat or not kernel? I don't remember if it's kernel level or not.
Yes,
but they have anti cheat.
Well, it's not kernel. It's user level anti cheat, but
Yep.
they're leveraging some pretty specific tech for it. They're using a library for that.
Yep. So
But,
I mean, watch your kids on
Roblox is
Roblox.
crazy.
I mean, it's an interesting article. I didn't, I always realized obviously there's crime and fraud in all of these networks, in game environments, I should say. But the extent to which it happens in Roblox seems to be pretty rampant. And what I gathered from it is I think Roblox Corporation can probably do a better job of policing their environment to curb a lot of this fraud.
Well, you look at how many users they have and how many games and environments. Like you're talking about managing. If you're thinking of this from a computer standpoint, you're managing all of the Docker instances across the entire world and all the pods at the Kubernetes level, and policing what's inside of those and all the at the hash level, all the processes happening. That's the level that we're trying to police with inside of Roblox, and that's leveraging the game how it's supposed to be used with the chats and the scripts and stuff that they're using for the code in the back end. But
also
there's a lot of scamming. Also,
to your point, Tyler, similar is managing like the account management that has to work for a 6-year-old. Is that makes it very challenging, right? Because
Yes.
but in challenging, maybe not. That's an ethical kind of dilemma, because if they were to put more security controls, they might lose that younger audience. It's like, I keep locking myself out. I'm going to go play another game, right? They're just going to get frustrated. So they have to kind of back off on some of those security controls for your account to make it accessible to the widest age ranges possible, I feel like. No, it's just my opinion.
Yeah, and because there's real monetary value, that's where there's going to be criminals that are going to abuse this. So with such a large player base, like I didn't realize how big the player base was.
Yeah,
like,
me neither.
What did they say, 146 million or something like that?
Say 43 million players log in every day.
Every day. So you're talking about real money. You look at some of the limited edition wares or like whatever they call their stupid thing, like in Fortnite.
Cosmetics. In Roblox, we've established is cosmetics, yes.
So those are worth.
How many of that 43
bucks.
million are underage?
The majority of them.
There's
Jeff.
no
I mean, I don't know for
verification
sure.
so.
I don't know for sure, but the way the article was written, in my experience, is that majority are under 18.
Yeah,
under 13, I would.
So wait a minute. So let's be clear.
Right?
Let's be clear. What we're talking about is a walled garden where you have significant amounts of games that are designed to attract a younger population. The whole environment is designed for a younger population. There's money involved because the kid wants to buy this game or that skin or that, what is it, cosmetic or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's mom, can I have a credit card? Dad, I need some Robux, whatever. And these kids, I mean, hell, we have problems getting grown adults to pay attention to phishing,
but Josh,
and scams and everything else.
The amazing thing, and I'm glad you said it because it reminded me that the I don't want to call them hackers, right? But the
cyber criminals,
the scammers.
They're not even
Scammers.
cyber criminals. They're not even good. They're just.
I agree. Scammer is the right term, Tyler. The scammers are one scammer they talked about was 15 and has stolen money, Roblox, and cash it out and all that stuff to order from Amazon, outfit his room with all these various things, buying gaming computers and LED lights and various things from Amazon and lying to their parents about where they got the money from.
It's reading through this article, it's a pretty fascinating ecosystem about that. If you have, there a lot of the attacks that I'm seeing here is a lot of social engineering, phishing, that type of stuff. And the 13-year-old interviewed said all you need to do is be really good with your words and you target the younger players.
Yes.
And you get their stuff, and then you've got their stuff, but now you need to convert it or launder it. If you've got Robux, you can cash out. But if you're not a developer, you have to go to the underground market to like trade it for stuff, which then you can cash out. There's another one that's that you can use to launder like your stolen cosmetics. It's effectively a casino. You put two things up against each other, a coin flip happens, and whoever wins the coin flip wins. but the stuff is transferred to a bot first, so it makes the trail of evidence gone.
So I'm sorry.
Holy crap.
Are we saying that there's anti-forensics, black market, and money laundering?
Yep.
Well, black market at least. It's not really money laundering. It's laundering it just to keep it anti-forensic style. And kids that are doing social engineering and at least some form of rudimentary scams in order to gain monetary value to use to buy more computers. And
it's my new recruitment platform.
Yeah, and then
I was just thinking this is where the next generation of hackers is coming from.
But also social engineering their parents in scheming to like not launder, but hide the fact where they got the money from their parents. Which
right, Paul,
many of us would be like, yeah, I looked at the network and putting the kibosh on that, but not everyone's looking at network packets.
Yep.
So what tool? I mean, how do we coach parents on how to deal with? I mean, some of it is just a parenting thing, but some of it's like the kid's really good, like that they could come up with some stories, be like, oh, my friend gave me a gift card or whatever. Like,
why did your friend give you a gift card? Like,
but also like we've read this article, so we understand what's going on. Yeah. So we're going into it going like they're guilty before proven innocent, right? If you don't think that all this stuff is happening and aren't familiar with it, then you may be like, oh, his friend gave me a gift card. You know what I mean? Still, I think parenting could be better in this case, but also it could be, there's all kinds of different scenarios that play out.
So I have a stupid question. If all of these scammers are underage, are there? I think I can answer my own question. I've been watching too much Law and Order on the break, but are there actual crimes being committed or prosecutable when they're all underage?
Oh, I mean,
there's no
two questions here. Crimes
are
being
they
committed.
Underage?
Yeah, they are underage, but crimes being committed, yes. Are they punishable? That's the interesting question. And as we've seen oftentimes with SIM card swappers, they'll be under the legal age to fully prosecute, with a felony, as an example, or even any crime. And that's why these various criminal networks will use children in this way, because they don't run as high of a risk of prosecution, right? I'm not saying kids can't be prosecuted.
There are no verifications or validations of age. So when we say underage, like that's relative. Their account profile says they're an age that they specified, to be clear.
Right. Yes, you don't really know.
You just change
on the internet
for whatever access control you need.
On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. Woof.
I've been asking on Discord. I'll throw it out here because most of you, if not all of you, are parents. What's the appropriate age these days to let a kid have access to a mobile device? Assuming that's what everybody uses, of course. And how long do you let them have screen time? Based on their age?
To me, that's parent discretion.
Yep.
For sure. And that's going to vary by your kids. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist or whatever, right? But I think kids mature in different areas at different rates, and every kid is different, right? So, and I think even for all of my kids, the age in which they got access to certain devices of various kinds, all varied. Right, because it also depends on the kid, like what they're going to use it for,
and the level of maturity.
But answer me this: if you could go back, would you not push that age forward as far as you could?
No, I'd
forward
push it.
Meaning younger, or forward meaning older?
I would push it young.
Meaning older.
I would push it as young as possible. However, with the caveat, Tyler, of me doing a better job of monitoring and metering.
As parents, so we're all busy.
Yep,
we have no good tools to monitor. YouTube Kids sucks. YouTube sucks. Google, I'm calling you out. You freaking suck really bad at allowing us tools to monitor and protect our kids. So you suck.
Yep.
To be clear.
Apple's a little better, but not really. I don't know.
At the end of the day, like from a brain standpoint and the development of like ADHD, anxiety, social disorders, even the things that we control as parents and have influence on, all of our hard work gets toppled by pretty much everything online. So the further you can push that out, like that's my only recommendation. That age is dependent on every parent and their recommendation. If I could push it till 14, I would, but that's probably not going to be socially acceptable. And your kids have, aspects and development that they have to interact with, but push that as far as you can, because it really is a pretty corrupting experience for even well-trained and well-raised kids.
Not to belabor this, but I can remember when my siblings were having kids, in the 70s, and I mean, even me growing up in the 60s and 70s, and having access to television, and the 3 network channels, and if you were lucky, you had the UHF channel. The whole idea of if we can generically call it technology being the babysitter, or technology being the way the parents can have a break, I think we would all agree that 60s, 70s television, the most outrageous thing was I Dream of Jeannie. They wouldn't let her belly button be shown. Up to what we're talking about today with Roblox, the dangers are more
different.
They're different, and they're more extreme, and there's maybe it's not there's physical safety issues as well. There's a lot more going on, but I guess the question of using technology as a babysitter has been around roughly 50 years. Before that, I don't know what there was. I mean, maybe you plop the kids in front of the radio, because I just watched A Christmas Story over the break. Jeff, is it really just parents' discretion, or should we be doing more and trying to educate more parents at the risk and the dangers?
There are studies that have been done. We didn't allow our 4-year-old to even see a screen for more than a few seconds or whatever. If a phone flashes by, until she was about a year old. We're doing the same with our 5-month-old. She's occasionally she'll sit with her sister, and so she can watch TV with her sister occasionally. But literally before they're a year or a year and a half old, they're not even supposed to see a screen. Because I'll tell you, my 5-month-old, if I've got her in my arm and I've got my phone out and she sees the phone, it's like a firefly with a bug lantern, man. It's horrible. Like it's insanely addictive to the little ones.
And I think I'm monitoring what they watch too, I think, is big. I tell my kids now, like, I'd rather have you watch a movie than go raw on a game or in front of a tablet or a phone, or God forbid watch YouTube, and God forbid watch TikTok. Like, don't do that. Like, that stuff I try and limit that as much as possible, where I find the best way, because technology, to Tyler's point, like, technology sucks. All the monitoring stuff has a lot of pros and cons, but mostly cons, and it doesn't work all that well.
But
I just take them away. Now I'm at the point of it, I just take them away. I'm like, I'm taking them away.
I'm speaking as a grandpa here, just watching, and I'm trying not to be judgmental, but I'm a grandpa, and I'm seeing how my grandchildren are interacting with technology. We talk about monitoring, but I think what you're saying, Paul, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're not talking about enabling some sort of controls on the device and just walking away. You're talking about something a little bit more interactive and proactive.
Correct. I like the more interactive way better, because I've tried both, and I like I'm taking your devices now, right? Or if you're on the computer's in a central point in the house, and everyone can see, what's happening on it, and you get limited time. Yep. Now go out and play. Or you know what? Sometimes if you've been to school all day and you've done you played with your friends, and you've gone to soccer practice, and you come home and you want to spend, half an hour looking at your iPad, like, that's cool.
I'm a firm believer in children using AR. That's actual reality.
Yes. Yes.
Where you go out on a ball field, basketball court, and you can, like, you're holding a basketball, and you can feel the texture of the ball, because you're actually holding the ball.
Absolutely.
And the sun's beating down on your face, and you can feel the heat because the sun's actually beating down on your face, and you can feel it.
Yeah, it's one of those, the old game Second Life. Yes. Like, the parody on that was Get a First Life.
Correct.
So before you go into Second Life, you should actually, access your closet to look at your wardrobe and to fornicate using your actual genitals.
We'll have we'll have a whole world that we're going to have to deal with eventually, and this will probably be within inside of our lifetime, where we have to look at dopamine depletion and the side effects and cause of serotonin and consistent dopamine releases for these kids. ADHD is already a huge issue, so we have to look at circadian rhythms and light factors that are now going into sleep disorders, anxiety that these kids are having to deal with because of screen time. So again, probably not something that you can eliminate and or fix, especially globally, or as a parent, you can do a good job for a little while, but I promise it will come down to a lot of fights. The problems we really need to solve are ways to do this better, and then look at educating our kids as to the consequences of consistently having a dopamine fix. What happens with those continual dopamine releases, and what does that do to your long-term development and your ability to find pleasure and happiness, and how to have that mental health discussion so that they can train themselves and educate themselves to understand why they're feeling depressed, or why they're not getting good sleep, or why they feel like they have to compare themselves to their friends because of these multiple avenues of serotonin, dopamine releases, and comparative analogies for psychology. So all of these factors come into play that we really need to look at and help our kids fight and get the tools to understand this long term, because the phones and the screens aren't going away.
No.
Well,
Dude,
I'll
agree
throw
with
myself
you.
out there. Excuse me. I was part of a social experiment, educational experiment back in 1969. There was this newfangled show that was coming out called Sesame Street, and my elementary school had televisions in each classroom, and we spent the first hour of every day in second grade watching Sesame Street. And look at what I've become.
Oscar the
Explains a
Grouch.
lot.
Oscar the Grouch.
Yeah, the
original curmudgeon.
I'm gonna add one piece to this, and that's that with children, you need to develop the habits. We go for walks all the time. Like we say we're going for a walk, and everybody heads to the door, grabs a jacket on the way, throws shoes on, and we're out the door. We've got a stroller that literally never gets folded up because we always go for walks. And so we developed a habit of being outside. No phones, no devices, no nothing.
I didn't know they made a stroller that could hold you, Josh. That's interesting.
Aww.
Man,
I did want to talk about password managers.
Yes, I've been waiting for this.
Right, we should
for
use or
weeks.
not. Tavis Ormondi wrote an interesting post. We'll get to the.
is it Ormondi or is it Ormandy?
Ormandy. I think it is
Okay,
Ormandy. I think
I'm
you're
just-
right.
I don't know.
You know when you read someome's name and you say it in your head and you're like, that's probably the wrong way to say
Let's
it.
bring him on the show and we'll ask him.
Yes,
There we go.
He's on the list for sure. He talks about, in general, password managers, how we give advice. Could be bad advice. It depends on the password manager. He talks about two different attack scenarios. One is the ability to interface with the content area. So the password manager interfaces with the content area on the website, but the content area on the website is also accessed by whoever is publishing the application as well. And then he talks about a different attack that uses inter-process communication and ultimately culminates with basically use the one that comes inside your browser and not a third-party one, because the one that comes inside your browser is using technology is inside the browser and can isolate their trusted UI from websites. And Tavis, of course, works for Google. And it's like, I use the one that comes with Chrome because I feel like it's better. I think it does. I trust Tav. I mean, Tavis is one of the most accomplished security researchers that's out there today. So inherently, I trust Tavis's opinion. I do believe it requires a little bit more study. Than the article that he posted, which is very good. But I'm going to take any away from Tavis's thing. For me, I want a little more data, a little more study. But I mean, it begs the question: like, do we ditch the fancy password managers, especially what's happened with Lastpass recently, and just use the built-in one, or none at all?
And so I think there's some use cases here that Tavis may have overlooked. I mean, I get that he's potentially talking to the average consumer that is looking to do password manager because much of their authentication is happening in a browser. But what about all of those other things that you use passwords for that are not browser based? Like, I want to remember the password to my virtual machine that I've got my AWS instant logins that are not in a browser because it's a terminal session. Where do I store those? Do I store those in the browser? And what's the mechanism for me to get it there? And I think that's where, and I think about some of the other functionality of some of the other stuff is if we're going to be doing two-factor authentication with things that is not browser-based, I don't even necessarily need an app. I can use it within the password manager, and Chrome doesn't have something like that.
I hear what you're saying, Larry, but I think you're a dying breed because, and again, you acknowledge it's the average consumer, but I think most people these days are doing everything, browser or application that's really in a browser based. So it's probably, covering, I'll make up a statistic, 85, 90%.
There's two use cases. I think the Larry's use case is valid if you're a sysadmin or doing everything things that are not browser based. I have a ton of passwords in a password manager that have nothing to do with browsers. Like TOTPCs or HSM keys and other things that there's no browser involved. But on the other hand, I've got passwords that I'd use with the browser, although I use that password manager to store them, and I either copy and paste or type them into the browser when I need them. But I think the browser password manager would be a safer place to store it in terms of accessing those websites.
I tend to split it up, Lee, to your point. I've started using KeyPass locally a lot more to store various ones that I don't want in a password manager that goes up into the cloud.
Yes.
So I've always kind of made this separation. I tend not to put any collection of like the really sensitive things in a password manager. I either just remember them or I store them somewhere else securely. And then like for a lot of the everyday stuff, I use a password manager because I think it actually gives you some nice features in that it can detect password reusage and allows you to share them with people securely, things like that.
Whether or not they've been disclosed in breaches and
correct.
And
I think,
I think you and Tyler, before you go on, I think you brought up a good point there about that cloud part. And I definitely store passwords in my Chrome browser, and I switched to using Chrome on my iPhone. You know why? Yep. Because I can sync my stuff, and that password that I had for one account that I set up on my desktop, I can now use with the password manager on Chrome on my iPhone because they're synced and in the cloud.
To Tavis's point, that's probably better than copying and pasting it out of a Lastpass app on your phone and into the.
You can sync your keychain to your Mac.
Yep.
There's a difference between password managers though too. Not all password managers are created equal.
True.
Where I see this particular argument falling down is somewhere where I would like a local password that is cloud synced to an extent, but not the actual passwords, and that has a third form of authentication like a secret, right? Like you look at something like 1Password, where you have a master password that unlocks your local password database that also has to have a secret file that's validated and hashed against the cloud server, which doesn't send up your keys or your master password or your seed. Those are all encrypted and pushed up and not sent. There's a hashing algorithm, and your database lives on your local device. So I want something with all three of those that has also MFA so that your token and key to unlock your local password database is validated. That's where you start to get into a little bit different scenario where you're not relying on the cloud 100%. LastPass is a great example of like, it was a little bit better. You had MFA. However, extensions get popped. Browser. The one place that I'm a little concerned that there's not as much research is when people allow browser extensions or browser applications the permission necessary to read the passwords. You look at the Raccoon stealer, you look at Redline, you look at all these stealers that upload to many of the criminal organizations that ransomware uses for the initial access, and those stealers are leveraging these browsers and that single point of failure with inside of the browsers and storage, once the user makes the mistake of leveraging something like an extension or an app that then has a permission to that sandboxed area. So while I believe Travis's assessment is correct, it is a better way to do it and overcomes a lot of the issues with some of the password managers and their janky ass ways that they interact with the browser for pasting that is definitely vulnerable. It does open up for some of the things like the stealers that are being used on a daily basis by the criminals in order to get all those passwords out of the browser. So browser and password stealing kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Okay. I got to jump in. And Paul, I'm assuming we're sort of glomming the whole Lastpass. I know you had an article about that. We're just having this general
let's glom it
discussion
together.
So when Lastpass broke, I actually got into my first real in-depth discussion thread on Mastodon, and people were lamenting LastPass and password manager, blah blah blah. And I was thinking back, I forget which episode, maybe somebody will look it up and drop it in on Slack, but it seems to me like one of the times I was in the studio in the fall, we were having a discussion with somebody about multi-factor authentication, and we started talking about how maybe we've the technology has evolved so that the traditional something you have, something something you are doesn't really apply anymore. And I started thinking about that again, and I've changed my stance. And here's where I am, and this is based on primarily the Lastpass thing, which is like, gee, you put all your eggs in one basket, and God forbid it should ever get compromised. Oh, but then it did get compromised.
Mm-hmm.
In defense of the original definition of multi-factor, or what used to be called two-factor authentication, which is use multiple forms of authentication, something you have, something something you are, and I want Larry and Tyler to weigh in on this from a password cracking perspective. I was commenting on Mastodon, it's like I use really long passwords and I keep them in my head. I have never used a password manager. And people were asking, like, but what about all the different places you have to go to? And I use the browser things, but most of the things I do online, I don't care about. If it's something I care about, I use these really long, cryptographically, strong passwords, but I have I memorize them, and I don't memorize the passwords. I memorize the rules, and I think when we were talking about this, a month or two ago, I was sort of like, well, maybe technology has caused us to, get to the point where we need to rewrite the definitions and rewrite the rules, and maybe the idea of something you have, know, and are has gone away. Maybe it's something is defunct. But I am leaning more towards now taking a stand on, gosh darn it. Memorize your damn long password, and this is where I want Tyler and Larry to jump in. A really long password, does it need to have all the different characters, or it can just be a really long string that you're able to memorize? If you're password cracking, if you get into 20 and 30 characters, are you going to crack my password even if you sort of somewhat know what my conventions are? So that's one question. My other question, though, is from a bad guy perspective, how often because we talk about passwords being, after all these years, still one of the primary ways that bad guys get in, by guessing or stuffing the passwords. Or my question is, how often are the bad guys actually stealing the hashes and cracking the passwords versus they're guessing the passwords, they're password stuffing? Because the real problem is you can have the greatest password in the world, but somebody in your organization is still using, winter 23 as their password with a capital W and an exclamation point at the end, and that's what gets the bad guy access. So I guess what I put out to you guys is my colleagues is I don't know if I'm ready to throw away this something and my Mastodon conversation, Larry, I'm sure you know him. Egypt was jumping in on the conversation, and he was talking about, well, he's got hundreds of accounts. I'm like, first of all, I know I'm an old timer. Get off my lawn. It's like, what do you have 100 things to log on to that you care about? But there were some people that popped up and they're like, they had legitimate things that they do. I'm like, fine, but what's wrong with just memorizing a really long password? And if it's long enough, couldn't you reuse it? Which, we're not supposed to reuse passwords, but if it's a 30 or 40 character password, I defy anybody to crack it. But I defer to you guys to do the cracking.
Yeah,
But tell me where I'm misguided in my thinking.
So there's probably two things there. First thing is you're relying on someone else's storage of that password.
Yep.
Right.
We know that there are often places that store that in clear text that can get breached, and that gets dumped. And then if you've reused that, then that gets stuffed somewhere, and that's
so no cracking.
Okay.
Yeah, reusing is bad for that reason.
Yep. And
but a password manager, I get all that, but a password manager is not helping you or hurting you in that context. Keep going.
It's helping you by telling you if you are reusing it in places you don't realize. If you've got 100 entries, that becomes even more critical.
Yep.
Right.
Back to the cracking.
So entropy is your next thing that you're talking about. Length always matters. I don't care who's doing what cracking. However, when I talk about entropy, you have to realize that there are multiple ways you do cracking. You've got the kind of wordless way, you've got the dictionary, you've got the brute force. Entropy matters for brute force, and your ability to do that space and tables makes a big difference. Now, when you talk about dictionaries and the ability to apply multiple rules and rules within inside those dictionaries, where I'm scraping every word you've said on a podcast via AI, and I've dumped that out to a text list, and now I combine those with a rule that puts some numbers, or I leverage something like keyboard walks with particular words in it, that's where you can begin to hit some of those upper limit spaces where people have done a good password, but because of the rules and because of the space and what I know about you or what your language is, that allows me to go after a larger subset of words. But the entropy still does matter, and you have a greater longevity. So the time of the password should match the ability of the attackers capable cracking. And I've got a spreadsheet that tells me how long it's going to take someone to crack based on all of the GPUs they have and how massive their cracking rig is, how long I'm going to keep that password, whether that's 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. And if those numbers end up colliding at any point, that's where I have to identify my risk and then decide how important the data is on that particular site.
Yep. Yeah, right. and I would argue, Jeff, that, and I think some of Tyler's great things there about taking multiple dictionaries and so forth. And I think the more complex you have your dictionaries and targeting certain types of perceived rules that you may have, especially if you're doing just something like alpha characters, lowercase alpha characters. I get a 30 character alpha lowercase password. Well, it's likely going to be some string of words that you can remember because it's probably not random stuff.
Right.
And, I'm thinking about 30 character phrases or groups of words, and I'm probably going to train my dictionary based on the entire contents of Project Gutenberg, movie scripts, things that you can easily remember, which are dramatically going to increase my success for that type of stuff.
But here's where I haven't done this in a long time. What are you cracking, Larry? Are you
the hash?
I know. How are you getting the hash?
That's
the other part that really matters is what the hash was encrypted by, the entropy and your hashes per second cracking algorithm. So the algorithm that those hashes were protected by.
How are you getting the hash? What?
So that is a compromise of either the server, the endpoint, or you're pulling it off of the computer, right? So you've either compromised the endpoint.
You've got some sort of access already, hashes. And you're trying to elevate privileges. I'm using my RCE,
or there was a breach,
25-year-old language.
Dumped the hashes to be cracked.
Right.
If you have your password and you're reusing it in 100 places, all I have to do is find one of those 100 places and find one that doesn't use, it doesn't actually. Okay, so we're talking about hash. So they actually do encrypt their passwords. So they hash, and so then what we've got is I crack into them. I grab their password vault, their password file, and then I've got 10,000 people with 10,000 passwords. and I use rainbow tables, and I get all of the passwords for all of those things, and then I go stuffing them into everything else I can think of, the top, 100, 1,000, whatever websites, and see which people reuse their passwords. And I bet you money that in the 50 to 100 to 200 websites that, Jeff, by the way, you honestly at least use 50 websites with passwords. Okay, I can't even imagine you don't. Then I'll probably
I trust you. You know, it's kind of like I don't have that many IP addresses at home, but then I went to work for Tenable and brought Nessus home. I'm like, oh shit, there's a whole lot of shit. There's a lot of stuff here. But
let me ask you a question. How many tabs do you have open on your browser right now?
Let's say 15.
Okay, you've got 15 accounts right now.
Okay.
And typically, if you're anything like most of us,
they're not all sites that I'm logged into, but probably most of them are.
They're not sites you log into every day because they've got cookies, but they're sites that you log into or have an account at.
Right. So, but none of what you guys are saying is telling me that not knowing the password is or using a password manager is advantageous over memorizing a password. I don't, you know, and let me add one more tidbit. You know, I used to teach to my clients and anybody that's interested the concept, and I don't hear this much lately, of you know, you have you know, all the sites that you have to log into. Granted, you know, I have to log into a whole bunch of different things that I don't really care about. You know, I have to log into PPWorks. I don't really personally care, no offense, Paul, if somebody compromises my PPWorks account and gets to PPWorks. I'm not saying I use a weak password, but I use a password that I have as my throwaway robust password that gets used at other places. I have the password that I use for all the different things that I have to log into. I have the passwords that are different, that are more unique, that I use for the sites that I care about, you know, banking accounts and stuff like that. But again, these are passwords that I know. I don't use a password manager. Other than the repeat and reuse of passwords, and I understand, you know, trust me, I understand the arguments for why you don't reuse a password, and you know, all the different sites that you're relying on them not being compromised and breached, and your hash of your password gets you know, compromised, and you end up in have I been pwned or whatever the website is. But defend the password manager. What Egypt was getting at, and I'm not meaning to pick on Egypt, but we happen to have this conversation. He basically said, well, but the password manager, it just makes it easier. So it's the old convenience trumps security.
Easier.
I think
if you're
right.
if you're going to remember,
Jeff, I wouldn't use a password manager.
But if you're going to remember a 30-character password, it's not going to be 30 characters of anything close to randomness that you're going to remember, right? With a password manager, you can conceivably have 50 sites, and all 50 sites could have a 30-character, a 40-character, depending on what the site supports, completely random. I mean, air quotes, random.
So that
there's no such thing as random.
Right. Random. And
I was going to say that's the other part. Like I actually don't believe in the random passwords and the entropy gain versus just leveraging something like a passphrase with spaces, punctuation, and a decent length, because the ability for any one of those capital letters to change a double space at the end, a double space at the beginning, a double space in the middle where you pick, you break that entire hash. And by doing a couple of those little things, it doesn't even need to be quite 30 characters. Like, you are not going to crack a 20-character password with a sentence that has spaces and all the punctuation within it.
Yes, exactly, Tyler. And you know, the guys that have run Crack Me If You Can at DEF CON for many years are guys that I used to work with, and I've had conversations with them about, you know, why are you guys still doing password cracking, and we've talked about, well, you know, what makes you fail, and the idea of, and I've only started doing this recently, just you know, actually putting a space, you know, a space is a valid ASCII character, which, you know, and I will tell everybody, and I openly challenge anybody to crack my passwords wherever you can find them, but I use song lyrics, and I use hopefully obscure old lyrics from songs that are probably written before most of you were born.
They're not obscure. They're on the internet.
They probably are on the internet, but even
I mean, there's
and
a word list with song lyrics, but as long as you're like chaining those together, adding a little bit of uniqueness with inside of that, that's, you know, to your point,
it's enough. I mean, you start mixing in the uppercase, you start mixing in the special characters, you start mixing in the substitutions of, you know, the KRAD, the numbers for the letters, put the spaces
again,
in the odd
time
places.
to crack and how long you have that password. It doesn't matter at that point. I've actually went back to actually using pen and paper. Like, I dare you, come break into the place where I keep my passwords in my house. Like, by the time you get to my passwords, you have a bullet. Like, that's a bad day for you. Like, my physical security is not too bad.
You know, 25 years ago, we used to tell people not to write passwords down because we were finding on sticky notes underneath the keyboards and on the monitors.
Yeah,
I mean, but yeah, write them down.
These punk ass little kids in Russia are not coming to my house. They're not getting into the U.S. for one. They're not flying to my house, and if they are, then I got a bigger security risk, and I'll deal with that appropriately after they try and get to that password list. Like, I 100% agree with writing stuff down now, because the physical risk is a business risk that is worth taking over keeping the same password across multiple sites. I tell my grandma, write your damn passwords down.
Hey, Tyler, if you were to find that USB drive, would you have the password written down somewhere?
Shit.
Whoa.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
Oh, that reminds me, Tyler, I've got somebody who's ex-Coastie searched for drugs for years, like is very confident in his searching ability, wants to come out and try. You want
to? Tyler needs a USB sniffing dog.
Yeah. So all day. He's welcome to come rummage.
Lee?
Yeah. But my point is
hold on. Lee's got a comment in here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lee.
So what I was going to say is, well, I completely agree that writing them down is a good thing, but the other thing is how do we teach people to store that piece of paper at the same way you would store the data protected by the most sensitive data protected by a password on that list? In other words, you know, you don't leave it lying face up on your desk. You know, you don't leave it where the housekeeper can find it.
Less of an issue because everybody works remotely now, right?
Yeah, with the ring of yellow stickies with passwords on them around the monitor.
I mean, that's a great point, Lee, because that is one of the things that we actually were trying to bring into many corporate organizations, was the security of not only the enterprise, but the work from home avenue for like top level executives. Like, if they're storing all their passwords in a notebook, I know where they live, I can get that information, I can target their Wi-Fi, I can break into their house, and that's available. That's a known risk. But the threat profile for most people, if you're not in an organization, is not that. However, you should just do it better, put it in a safe, and know where it's at. Like, if you need to use it every day, you know, you have a process that you lock it up every night after going to work at the end of the week. Like, obviously, I would say the risk profile matters. If you're an executive, you 100%, your house should be considered a target, and you should have appropriate measures in place to not make it easy from that perspective. People don't think about their house. They think that's their sanctuary. It's safe. I'll tell you, your house is not safe. Unless you live in Idaho.
Tyler, you know, I found a lot of socks that I was missing. If I pull the drawer out and they've fallen behind the drawer, have you looked there?
They're in the dryer. No, but my question to the people that sometimes do password cracking or doing penetration testing where you're trying to do something with passwords, are you more often password cracking or password stuffing? That's my first question.
Password stuffing.
Yeah.
So you have to have initial access. You have to have compromised something where you have a password to begin tearing down and pulling on that thread. If I get one password or I get one hash, then I can begin to crack it. I can leverage that, spray that other places, and use it as a stuff. If I don't have anything, I have to start with stuff.
I'm glad to notice some things haven't changed, Tyler, because yes, that's how we used to do it a million years ago. Get that foot in the door, and then try to grab credentials and hashes and start cracking.
You may, like, with all the breaches, though, that is one of the big differences, I think, in today's world, is looking at hashes that have not been cracked, that may be part of a breach, that have corporate emails or corporate identities tied to them that offer the possibility of cracking. That then becomes something that you have to think of as a threat risk or a threat profile. Hopefully those have been changed if they're identified in a breach, but most haven't. So you've got the ones that are being sold from the browser password stealers. that may be active, or they've got a bot on there. You've got the ones that have been in a breach that haven't been cracked yet that you can go and just start cracking. You have the ones that have been breached and cracked or were in clear text that you can go and then try and credential stuff. So that's really your three options.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about PyPy, because I feel like this is a solvable problem. So the PyTorch compromise, supply chain attack. So they learned about a malicious dependency package that was uploaded to PyPy with the same package name as the one that shipped with PyTorch nightly package index. Since the PyPy index takes precedence, this malicious package was installed instead of the version from their official repository. I feel like there's a solution to this problem, right? Like, you shouldn't just be able to step on a dependency with a malicious package like that.
Right.
How would you deal with this? What if both packages are signed, right?
Yeah,
Right.
This one really came from me.
Signed by whom?
Well, what if one package? What if we implement signing? Okay, there was a Torch Triton package signed by the PyTorch project, and there was a malicious package in PyPy that was signed by the malicious actor.
Right,
Well,
they're both signed.
They're both signed, saying they came from different sources. So how do you know which one to trust? Now, PyPy has made this decision for you that the one from PyPy takes precedence.
Right.
To me, that's weird.
I mean, so what about? I'm trying to figure out. I got that the names are indexed, and it was the bogus package was higher in the index, so it came out first. But what if, Paul, you and I both have repositories and working on stuff, and we just happen to call our package the same thing just because we did? I would have to think that the repository each would have to be part of that index, because otherwise you'd have all kinds of collision.
Yeah. I think it's I think it's a flaw in PyPy,
in the way they're
Python
doing
in general.
things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As I recall, what they did is they wound up creating a copy of the former bogus package name that went basically to dev null in case somebody else tried to squat on it. And they changed the legitimate package name, so it's not called Torch Tritron. It's called something dash Torch Tritron now. I can't pronounce it. Sorry.
This very much screams of what Bastille Linux versus Bastille-Linux back in the day with the domain squatting.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my God.
Because of the two different repos, there's no synchronization between the two of them. So would be very easy to name squat, and especially in the one that has precedence. When you jokingly put, I think there's a solution here, and I think you're right. There is a solution here. Then needs to be some synchronization between those options.
Well, some name synchronize. Yeah. How do you name synchronize all the open source Python packages, regardless of how they're distributed? Right, is the key.
Mm-hmm.
How
practical this is an SBOM question.
Well,
you're not wrong.
I mean, sorta. I mean, not really. I mean,
the canonicalization and serialization of packages is a big issue. It's where does the name come from? What does the name mean? What are the dots?
But also, Josh, I think it's the difference between a decentralized, more free and open environment that we get from open source versus a more closed sourced and centralized. Your examples earlier were of the Apple App Store, right? The Google Play Store. Because it's centralized, they can enforce and prevent namespace collisions because they control the central database of where everything comes from. When we move and we get more freedom and we get more open, we lose that ability to control the namespace because it's decentralized. Because I can get software packages from anywhere. Because on Linux, I can do a million different ways to get software. It's decentralized.
Right.
Now, that offers more freedom for both developers and users, right? But that comes at a cost of the security controls that are inherent with a centralized environment. I don't know. I like freedom, but I want freedom to come with security, and I think that's where we get the butting of the heads.
Security usability.
Yep. Yes, it is. I mean, because it's more. I don't like how Snap, creates its sandbox, so I'm going to use Flatpak. But then with that freedom comes issues. So maybe it's a harder problem to solve than we think.
Yeah. Well, I think, but when you hit, when you said SBOM, you're starting to get in the right universe, and that is, at some point these days you have to be watching like a hawk what packages you're bringing down, that they're really the one you meant, and it's not trivial, but don't just grab the head end package anymore. Although that's kind of discongruous with grabbing the nightly build, which is the head end package.
Right, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, Lee, right, that a package changes. In other words, I have PyTorch, and it includes Torch Triton, and I do an update. And guess what? Right. The new version of Torch Triton has a different signature, or a different hash, rather, I should say. It's got a different hash.
What's a new version?
It's a new version, right? How do I know if that was legitimate, like the software I should get, or if it's malicious? But the hash is different. But I expect the hash to be different.
Well, I'm saying that the hash changes. You should throw an exception and then do something. Don't just like blindly put it in all your continuous builds with the new hash until you're sure it's right.
I agree.
It becomes hard.
But then you have to test that based on behavior, and I agree. I think some of the more security advanced organizations that I've spoken with do exactly what you're saying, Lee, and I like that. But it's a lot of work, right? It's not for everyone. They know they're incorporating MongoDB, right? But the next version of MongoDB comes down, and they go, I'm not just going to blindly upgrade. I'm gonna test, and I'm gonna look at the behavior, and I'm gonna look at the configuration, and make sure that's really the right version of MongoDB. And they're doing some of the testing to make sure of that. You don't often find that, though. That's hard. There was another one in here about supply chain. There is no software supply chain. This was an interesting story. Yet even a different supply chain kind of issue. The Gorilla framework was it a Go library? No, was it Go or NPM? In any case, it doesn't matter in the context of the story, right? So they developed this. It was like a HTTP middleware, to use an old term, kind of package, right? And it got used by a lot of people. And it's a toolkit for Go. And the developers were like, we just kind of like did this to like make something cool, and now there's like 15,000 people using it. And now someone's got to like maintain all that and deal with the pull requests and issues and all this stuff and feature requests. Yeah, and they actually put out a call on multiple occasions. We're like, can someone help us with, like, can we get some more volunteers to help us with this? Now there's 15,000 people using it. I mean, I'm not exactly right. I'm not sure, but if it was 15,000.
There's a lot of people using it.
Yeah. A lot of people, thousands of people using it. Can someone help? And everyone's like, no. And so rather than abandoning it, which is bad, because then it doesn't ever get updates. And if it has a vulnerability, there's no one left around to fix it because it's abandoned. And rather than, the developers actually made this conscious decision. They said, we don't want this to fall into the wrong hands. So therefore, we're going to pull it entirely and wipe it out of existence. It's gone. It's gone. It's the nuclear option, man. Like,
now, arguably, they wiped it from the face of the planet, but someone's got a copy of it somewhere.
Right, and could stand it back up and do a namespace collision kind of attack, right? Yep. But it chronicles in detail how all this came to be, like the nitty-gritty details of this, which I thought was really interesting. It's a great read. It's a good article. I don't know if the nuclear option is necessarily for everyone. So they decommissioned a widely used project that was at the risk of rotting from the inside out. And instead of let it live in disarray or fall into the wrong hands, it's simply gone. It's a link in the chain of software that has been purposely broken to force anyone using it to choose a better and hopefully more secure option. It's interesting. We don't always see it go that way, right? We see for backwards compatibility to don't break anything, so just leave it out there, despite the fact that it might not get updates or malicious actors might take it over. Whatever. Just leave it out there so we don't break people's shit.
Yeah.
Do we lose Josh?
We did for a moment, I think.
Oh.
Speaking of losing Josh,
I like
you
this
you
segue.
posted a good one to our internal Slack channel earlier this week to peek in on of Puckungfu.
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 Puckung. I like what you said. Puckungfu. Puckung. It's Puckungfu.
PUC Kung Fu.
PUC Kung Fu.
Puckungfu.
Puckungfu. Sounds like a Puckungfu. Bless you.
Here we go.
Phew.
Yeah, so automated update process that has a command injection vulnerability, which Larry and I were talking earlier, and collectively decided this is like a trend that we're seeing, that these IoT devices have these processes that reach out over the internet, usually via HTTP or HTTPS, and
To receive JSON.
to pull down some JSON to tell it to do stuff. It kind of varies. In this case, like the irony was, this is an automated update process.
Right. And the
everything I could tell. It didn't call that out in the article, but like I read between the lines, I'm like, this is an automated update process. Like it was pretty apparent from reading the code and the commands and the JSON and all that stuff that it was the automated update process that reached out to a server at Netgear, pulled down some JSON and goes, do I have an update or not? Now, I don't know if it automatically applied that update or if it was just downloading it, giving the user an alert going, hey, you got a firmware update. When they log in, it's already there. It's already been pulled down. It's notified the user in the web interface, hey, you've got a firmware update. It's not the way it happened in 2007 when Larry, you and I wrote the book. Like you had just had to know that there was a firmware update because it wasn't automatically reaching out. But now the process that is reaching out are the processes that are vulnerable because there's command injection in this, and we've seen this again, a trend of this.
And I think that
Input.
again, input validation, Tyler. Like this is OWASP
Input validation. I was just about to say that.
OWASP top 10.
Deserialization and input validation.
Yeah, like seriously, like, oh yeah, no, but we're getting it from a trusted source. No, you're not, because you're putting this device on an untrusted network.
Correct. Where
And you're
someone
not-
else could control the DNS name resolver.
DNS certificates.
Yep.
Pinning. Any of that.
Yeah, sometimes certificates and pinning come into play too if it is HTTPS.
The DNS thing too. Like, I will give it, like, there's a little bit of work to get to
Agreed.
the point where you're man-in-the-middling that WAN and poisoning that DNS. There's a few steps to do that, and there's some caveats to it. But again, we're back to like, why are we not at a point where DNSSEC is like something that is a thing, or we've gotten away from DNS? It's not ever going to be a thing. I don't know. We're at this WAN interface that we don't control their DNS servers or what gets assigned to us via DHCP. In many cases, from like Comcast or your cable provider, like sometimes you don't even control that. So your ability to rely on their DNS and them not being compromised down or upstream also becomes an issue that you have to think about.
Yeah.
And then
Go ahead, Lee.
I'm reading through this article, just skimming it, and it's like, did I catch this right? That although they were using an HTTPS GET, they disabled the certificate verifier so that
Sounds
it
about
could
right.
be anybody's site impersonating it?
Sounds about right.
Sounds
Because,
about right.
because doing that
It was a
certificate
pro-
validation is computationally expensive, and if you're on a lower power IoT device, then
Right. Especially one from Netgear.
Understood. But
yeah.
if it's something that's running just as part of checking for updates, I think you could possibly take the performance hit. I don't know, maybe I
Agreed.
don't understand all
Agreed.
the use cases.
I agree that in that trade-off, Lee. Yeah, wholeheartedly. What's also was interesting was they did this research for Pwn to Own 2022 Toronto, but before Pwn to Own, Netgear released a firmware update version one day prior to the competition, and the vulnerability was no longer eligible because Netgear fixed it. And they say, however, we managed to find an alternative Netgear WAN vulnerability after the patch in time, as they described on Twitter, which you can find a link in the article. And so they found another vulnerability, conceivably from that description, in a day. So, kind of soft and squishy security model, which I mean, not.
And I'm gonna say this is probably not the only IoT device that has this particular library implemented and or available via the WAN. Like you talk about devices reaching out to the internet to do a check and or leveraging a known URL and pulling back the firmware validation using this library. There's a couple others. So this is just always going to be an issue. Like, why are we still doing it this way?
Right. And it's funny, we brought up the DNSSEC thing. Like, why is this not a thing? I mean, that's cool and all, but then we combine this with, you really want to get evil and it will require more doing. Combine this with some nation state type of stuff where all of a sudden route advertisements, all of the stuff is going to China.
Mm-hmm.
And
Damn BGP.
yeah, who cares about DNS? Because it's all going via IP to somewhere else that can answer for these things. And like,
Who controls those BGP routing advertisements? And,
everyone does.
And if you do have those compromised and those are controlled, and or maybe they're not even known malicious, they're being siphoned, like then you've got an entirely different issue that is a problem on the internet right now with many of the large providers. So not only that, leveraging these for things like botnets and or to route traffic through, like you guys go back to the DDWRT days, right? Like some of the nation states were leveraging those OpenWrt routers or Linksys routers. They were just adding IP table rules in the memory, and they had unattributable hardware that they were routing attacks through and daisy chaining those together so that they could reboot that router once they're done. There's no logs, and it's an easy device with an IP address that allows them, that unattribbed infrastructure. Like nation states were doing this back in early 2000s. Why would we think they're not going to be leveraging these today?
Yep. Lee and Jeff, you guys remember World War II, right?
I was there, yeah.
You guys are there, right? I feel like you remember it better than we do because you were there. But after nearly 70 years, Robert Oppenheimer has been cleared a black mark against his name when he had his security clearances revoked. And this article does a pretty good job of telling the story. There's been a few books. See, the book, I remember reading a book. I think, was it called The Manhattan Project? The name of the book might have been called The Manhattan Project.
I think so, yeah.
And I read it as part of, when I was in college, I'm like, I want any class that has to do anything with technology. And there was a history of modern science and a history of modern technology. And I think it was history of modern science that we read the Manhattan Project book. But I don't think it went into like all the bad things. Maybe I just don't remember, but all the bad things that happened to Oppenheimer after that. So he was basically under suspicion of being a Soviet spy. And now, 70 years later, he died in 1969 of cancer. It said in the article. And
67.
67, thank you. And now has been exonerated. Is that the right word for that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
That was kind of interesting.
turns out the investigative process didn't follow their own internal process, and as a result, revealed flaws that shouldn't have been attributed to Oppenheimer and all that type of stuff because they didn't follow the process.
Right.
And in fact, were illegal for them to. My understanding was illegal for them to do that.
Interesting.
Crazy story. And there's a new doc at the end of this one.
Yep. From Universal Studios entitled Oppenheimer.
Definitely gonna watch that. So it's a documentary film.
Yep.
All-star cast: Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr. Pretty cool. Definitely gonna watch that one.
Yeah, it's
Yes, I remember seeing bulletins about this at work. The Department of Energy was so thrilled that was actually apparently a long-term goal to restore this. It took many administrations and many years. So it's actually pretty cool.
Yep, his security clearance was revoked on the grounds of fundamental defects of character for communist associations far beyond the tolerable limits of prudence and self-restraint expected for those holding high government positions. That's kind of concerning. And
that was the thing.
I get it.
That was a thing back in the day. Everyone was communist.
Yep.
They went great lengths to, if you were anywhere close to being affiliated with a communist, it was a bad thing. Jeff and Lee, I feel like you should remember this better than me.
Yes, I
Speaking
used to
of-
be a communist.
Tyler.
The PHP persistence article is definitely one people should check out. This is widely used by a lot of really good actors.
I didn't realize how widely used it was. I thought it was pretty cool, loading PHP extensions in memory, But apparently that's a pretty common practice, Tyler, from what you're describing.
There's a lot of places that leverage that. I mean, you got stuff being put in, extensions being put into browsers. You've got MySQL applications or extensions being leveraged, PHP extensions. Even, I mean, you look at like it's like WordPress plugins, right? Like that persistence and the ability to execute codes. It's like a good web shell that's not in such an obvious place that gets loaded every time. So you have that persistence mechanism even after reboot, which makes a big difference and is often overlooked from if it's named well and has some decent coding in it, is almost always overlooked by auditors. So
this was this is a very lengthy read. As you get into this article, and the author advises that it's mandatory that you read the previous 2 articles. So this article is called "Spice Up Your Persistence: Loading PHP Extensions from Memory." He recommends that you read Backdoors in XAMPP Stack Part 1, PHP
That's
extensions.
a fantastic article.
That Part 1?
Part 1 is amazing.
And Part 2 is PHP extensions, backdoors in XAMPP Stack Part 2. Then it's UDF in MySQL, backdoors in XAMPP Stack Part 3. Oh, Apache modules and improving PHP extensions as a persistent method. They're all linked to in the article. So it's a whole, when you got some reading motivation.
It's a lot of information, and if you've not done any PHP web shells or persistence or execution, definitely a primer is a good idea.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Turning Google smart speakers into wiretaps. This was another great article. This research article.
This was my favorite article.
And there's another one along this lines too that I want to hit when we're done with this.
But so you'll read a whole bunch of headlines about how basically the headline of turning Google smart speakers into wiretaps from every popular tech news outlet.
Yep.
Don't read any of that crap. Go read article number 7 under my stories, which is the original research post that was published by what's his name? I don't know if he puts his name on there or what, but downright nifty. Matt Coons, downright nifty.me. Go read that. That's the one you want to read. It was awesome. So it boils down to this roughly. There's a lot of aspects to this. There's a Python script that takes your Google credentials and an IP addresses input and uses them to link your account to the Google Home device provided at an IP. So provided you have access to a Google Home device, either on the same network or can gain access to it by IP address, you can essentially manipulate the API to associate I don't know if it's an additional or if it replaces it, additional Google account to add it into your Google Home network so that an attacker
adds it into the Google Home family sharing part of that.
So it's multiple accounts, right? So like if it's my Google Home device, my account has access to it, but now an attacker can basically add themselves to it.
Yeah, you can invite someone like your wife. You would typically add family members to the Google Home in order for them to be able to do all the functions that they have inside the home. And there's certain functions you can do as a guest, which they cover in this, which we were looking at to do other interesting stuff. But he found some way more juicy things than I was looking at. So really fun.
Then he says, rather than
makes a routine.
Yes, make new routine. Routines are basically like action scripts within the Google Home device. So he also says, rather than making a local API request to control the device, you instead make a local API request to retrieve innocuous-looking device info and use that info along with cloud APIs to control the device.
Yeah, you basically deauth it to put it into its standalone mode so that it stands up its own AP. Once the AP stood up, you can connect to it and leverage that API to do the next part of the scenario. So you're basically chaining kind of 3 things together to do it.
Yeah, so those different attack scenarios. One was completely remote. That the author really didn't like because he's like, I'd have to social engineer a user, and that could be inconvenient. So if you social engineer a user, let's say, to install an Android app, you could put on that Android app the capability to use MDNS to discover Google Home devices, send them the API request, and add your account to it. I liked that because it was purely remote. But again, it required that either I put a malicious app in the Google Play Store or I socially engineer a user to install an app, both of which are not trivial, obviously. And of course, if I just put this functionality into an Android app, my attack is then opportunistic and not targeted, right? So he said better.
Or you happen to find yourself on a network where you can use MDNS to fingerprint on shared networks, such as non-secured hotel networks or airplanes or places that Chrome devices might exist and be beaconing their MDNS all over the world.
Right. Yeah, his kind of better scenario was I get on their Wi-Fi network and do it that way. Do I have to be on their Wi-Fi network? Or no, I got to de-auth the device. So I don't have to join the Wi-Fi network. So I get in proximity of the Wi-Fi network. I de-auth the Google Home device because I can see the MAC addresses and I can derive which ones are Google devices by their MAC address, by the OUID. OUID, did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Organizational unit identifier. Yep.
Yes.
The first 3 octets of the MAC address.
Correct. And then I de-auth those devices, put it into setup mode, and then I can add my account to it. And I mean, turn it into a listening device and do any number of things that you can do with a Google Home device.
At the very and speaking of Wi-Fi, at the very end of the document on the actual release there on downrightnifty.me, the footnote on de-auth attacks on the Google Home Mini.
Yeah.
Said, yeah, you can totally de-auth this because it doesn't support WPA3.
Oh, so WPA3 has protections against de-authing.
WPA3 uses effectively 802.11w, which is de-auth verification.
Mm-hmm.
And only
is that because it's protecting the management frames?
It is only protecting de-auth management frames.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Hence why in 617 we talk about other ways to do de-auths, which have become more and more important now that WPA3 is a thing and can prevent the traditional de-auth frames using de-authentication-based attacks. And we've covered these methods in 617 for a long time.
Is de-authing there as a protection mechanism, or is there other use cases such as roaming where you want to de-auth?
De-auth has some legitimate uses. Let's say Access Point has
too many users.
Load spectrum management.
You're implying that that's not the main reason why people use them.
No. It's most often nefarious, Jeff. Yes.
Yeah, arguably most often nefarious.
Yes.
I mean, otherwise you don't hear about it. It just does.
Right?
It just does. Yeah. But
rogue access detection, access point detection for de-authing those and notifying and or fast handoff, right?
Yep. I was gonna say roaming, right? I feel like it's using roaming.
Forced roaming for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Forced roaming. But the thing that I think was interesting is like, they set WPA3 up on an access point that was required. And then they set it to optional, and that's known as backwards compatibility mode, where WPA2 is still in effect on a WPA3 network where it connected. And they assume that the limitation, it is a limitation of the Wi-Fi chip in the Google Home Mini that it uses. And no, it is not a limitation of the chip. It is a limitation of the software.
Yeah, that's software-based.
It's all software-based.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because 802.11w is a signing procedure.
Blame the hardware.
Yeah, it's a signing procedure for those de-auth frames. Effectively,
I got you. So it's independent of hardware. Yeah,
yep.
Yeah, it's a great article.
Yep.
Let's see.
Eufy cameras.
Eufy. Oh yeah, let's jump to one of your stories. Larry.
Well, actually, it wasn't. It was a story that I had thought about and meant to add and didn't. But you grabbed a distillation of that in your story number 7, our home video surveillance system safe.
Yeah, which was from our last episode, I realized.
And that's okay.
And I don't know if we talked about it or not, so I don't think
we did. But the big one was it was some issues with Eufy, EUFY, who arguably is not a very high-end home monitoring system, but then again, for the consumer stuff, what really is. And that Eufy promises a cloudless experience, which turns out is complete bullshit.
Oh, yeah. So this was my story number 17.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. Turns out when you dig into the web interface,
You say UEFI, and I think that's sometimes how we pronounce UEFI.
UEFI, yes, absolutely.
That's what I keep hearing.
Yep. UFY in this case. Iffy?
You'd still say UEFI, I think.
UFI, yeah. So arguably, UFI says no cloud-based stuff here. It's all local. Yet when anytime using the web interface, you start looking at the code in the web interface, and it notes that anytime there is a person detected, it sends an image to the cloud. Sends an image off device. One of the other ones that I thought that was kind of crappy on the accusations here is that they say there's no way for you to connect to the cameras remotely. UFI does. Yet the researcher found that there's not MDNS stream. There is a video stream. RSTP, yeah. There's an RSTP stream available on the devices that you can connect to remotely. Like, you can use VLC to connect to these cameras over RTSP, but they need to be exposed to the internet for that to be able to be connected remotely. So, yes, UFI says you can't connect to a stream remotely. I mean, I think remotely is splitting hairs here. You can be on the same local network and connect to it, or if it's exposed via the firewall. But then we start talking like UPnP. Remember UPnP?
I was just about to say that.
Remember UPnP, Paul, back from the Linux days?
It's just such a security atrocity.
It's even bigger now, right?
Oh, yeah,
UPnP gets punched for every device.
Except for the ones you really want to work, like your Nintendo Switch, so you can do, cloud. You can do what is it? The game that everybody was doing.
Roblox?
No, Animal
Solitaire.
Crossing. Oh, Animal Crossing. You want to do Animal Crossing? You got to expose your DSs to the internet. No UPnP. Thank you very much. Ask me how I know this. But
not good.
No. Yeah.
That was similar to the TrendNet cameras was mentioned in a podcast I was listening to. And there was just a URL that required no authentication that just gave you the raw stream. It was like when it was like / debug or something like that, and just gave you full access.
Second, to access a particular camera, you need to know its unique URL. In other words, its address on the internet. But these addresses are generated in a predictable way based on the device's serial number printed on the box, plus the current date and time. And that extra security is a random 4-digit number.
So 1 in 10,000, you get it out the gate?
Yeah, pretty much.
The thing that this article does a good job of explaining things, the thing that that was kind of, I wish they'd gotten over. They kept going off on the no cloud promise. I mean, you could have your own data center handling this stuff and not qualify as a cloud, and still the problems are the same. I just wish they hadn't harped on that no cloud thing, because that could actually been a no claim if it was their own, like, traditional data center. It's still creepy and wrong what they did.
Yep. I think the original one of the original articles at Ars Technica, they said that, and I love this quote: "If your device has a lens and Wi-Fi, sooner or later someone will find a security hole in it."
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a reason my cameras are external, not internal.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't do the camera inside thing.
Yep.
What about your car?
Separate camera systems.
What about your car though? I mean, it's kind of. I don't
have any cameras in my car.
But if your car has connectivity in an app, they can abuse the API to gain access to the car. And it was
that has an always-on LTE modem by default from the factory. You can't disable.
Yes, Sam Curry. Hold on, Sam Curry.
My LTE connection was disabled by by the cellular companies, as in it was 3G, and that's now all gone.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah. My story number 9: web hackers versus the auto industry. Critical vulnerabilities in Ferrari, BMW, Rolls-Royce, Porsche, and more. I know you guys are concerned now about the security of your Ferraris and Rolls-Royces and Porsches, right?
BMW.
You're gonna have to cancel that order from Amazon.
I mean, you throw some big names out there, but BMW was on the list.
Yeah,
and
but
BMW were.
It's more than that. So they found vulnerabilities in
Yep.
Kia, Honda, Infiniti, Nissan, Acura, Mercedes-Benz, Hyundai, Genesis,
BMW,
Rolls-Royce, Ferrari, Spirion.
yes, Ford,
Edsel,
Toyota, Jaguar, Land Rover,
Sirius XM.
AMC,
Really?
Peugeot,
REO Speedwagon.
Lada.
Let's roll back to the Edsel.
And they go into details on all of them. I mean, it's a lot to take in. Various vulnerabilities in your API, essentially, that allow this level of access.
Yep.
What? This sounds like a flip question, but it's a serious question. Are there monetarily incentivized bad guys out there actually trying to hack cars yet? I mean, is there have they figured out a way to monetize taking over cars yet? Just out of curiosity.
I don't think anybody's ransomed a car yet where they take over functionality and lock you out until you pay them, but that should be coming soon.
That comes from the
I know
manufacturer.
that there's APT groups that buy telemetry and or get stuff off of cars.
Are they using the APIs to steal cars, or is still the stealing happening via the key fob style? I know there was certain cities and towns that saw huge upticks in steal. I think it was Hyundai, right? That someone like posted some videos. They were available online.
Yeah,
it caught on, and it was like super easy to basically remotely unlock and start the car. And I don't know if that was a key fob thing or if it was an API thing.
And I used to be really good in high school at breaking into cars by,
Coat hangers?
using a coat hangers to pop the lock. But other than just, for the thrill and the fun of it, are there serious attacks that have happened yet against cars that we care about?
I mean, I arguably there's probably some monetary stuff, theft, and then sending them to the old school chop shop for parts.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the finding summary for Kia, Honda, Infiniti, Nissan, and Acura. Fully remote lock, unlock, engine start, engine stop, precision locate, flash headlight, and a honk vehicle's horns using only the VIN number. I mean, yep.
Has anybody figured out how to execute the fart app on the Tesla yet? Which Joff loved. The last time I saw Joff, that was his favorite feature.
I mean, what's not to love? I mean, I'm sorry, but if you don't find farts funny, then you're just left. I mean, if you find farts funny, then you've got farts and funny. If you don't find them funny, you don't have any funny, and then you just have the same amount of farts. I mean, you might as well find them funny and get some more.
Yeah.
The average American farts 6 to 8 times a day.
Yeah.
Jeff, to your question,
The old fart.
Before that, the piece that I'll point to is that 2010 through 2021 Kia and Hyundai vehicles that use a mechanical key, not a key fob, and push button to start the car. There was a TikTok kind of viral video that showed people how to steal them using a USB cord to hotwire the car.
Yeah,
and it was like Los Angeles saw like a 200% increase
it wasn't that they used a USB cord to hotwire it. It was that the USB USB-A jack was the same size as the thing to turn the tumbler.
To turn the thing. I did see that one. Yes.
We talked about that. We talked about that.
It wasn't so Jeff, it wasn't electronic usage of the USB. It was usage of the USB as a physical device.
Factor.
Yeah, a form factor to actually turn the key and steal a car.
Yep.
Form factor. That's very generous.
We had an 11-year-old who was one of our most prolific stealers.
And arguably, Paul,
Kia Boys, hashtag Kia Boys.
I'm looking at the BMW stuff they've got further down this article. It looks like it's all API based.
Mm-hmm.
And
Correct.
also with misconfigured single sign-on. Yep.
And we got a few
Interesting.
deprecated websites that still worked problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's like they're running with scissors here. They're just in such a big hurry that we never run into that. Security goes on later.
Yep.
Security? What security? We don't need security.
We'd forgotten about it completely.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing to me is that one of the brands they listed was Toyota, but they didn't mention Lexus, which is a Toyota brand.
Mm.
So they don't secure the Toyota brand, but they secure the Lexus brand. Or they just didn't look at Lexus.
Yeah, and also based on my experience, depending on your manufacturers, and this is one of the things we talk about in the IoT class for SANS that James and I put together. We do some analysis on the head unit firmware for an SUV.
Yeah.
And you can see that it's used across multiple head units, across multiple manufacturers, across those Toyota Lexus lines as well. So it's
right.
So you're saying it's a supply chain issue, Larry?
No,
maybe
Right back there.
maybe.
Hey, can we talk a couple of Lee's stories?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
I wanted to talk Southwest, but I'm not sure there's a security aspect to it.
Yeah.
How about his story number 7? Ransomware gang apologizes, gives sick kids hospital free decryptor.
I saw that headline.
Apparently, bad guys have a code of ethics.
And after we do this one, I want a ransomware one that I have that is kind of local to us. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
I put this one in because, I'm thinking, so the Lockbit ransom gang said one of their affiliates, they have a code of ethics, which includes not hacking the hospitals. And so they gave them the free decryptor, except the hospital was over 50% through recovering their system. So it was of nominal value. But I'm kind of going, okay, these guys are into ransoming. I mean, why do they do this? Are they trying to build themselves a reputation so that maybe, when that there's honor among thieves. So when you get extortion, you'll pay.
There's code ethics, Lee.
There's
Come
code,
on,
but
like
see,
bad,
but
bad
I
guys
like
are
in
only
this-
so bad.
I watch too many mafia movies and mafia documentaries, and there was a time in the mafia, as an example, where they did enforce their version of a code of ethics, right? So, like in their code, killing people was totally fine, but there was a time when the code was like, you can only kill if you get permission and if it's within our own family, right? Like no kids are harmed or anything like that, and then you get in a lot of trouble and get killed yourself. There was the code of ethics a while back in the mafia. There were no drugs. No drugs are not. You're not allowed to deal drugs because people get hurt, and that that went out the window as well. And so did a lot of other those ethics. It's I think kind of a similar thing where the criminal organization in one of the criminal organizations is basically enforcing this code of ethics. Does that mean there isn't another ransomware gang that's like, oh, I don't care what kind of, if it's a hospital or not, like I'm still going to ransomware it and not care about any blowback from other criminal gangs that might be trying to enforce the code of ethics?
No, I hate. I hate to. We bring this up. That other gang that, this one comes and says, hey, this ransomware gang says that we don't attack hospitals.
Right.
Yet they were vulnerable in this case to Lockbit. And how many other derivations or of Lockbit are there out there? So now some other ransomware game that doesn't have this goes, oh, hey, this sick kid's hospital vulnerable to Lockbit. I bet they haven't fixed the problem. Oh, hey, send him Lockbit. No code of ethics there.
Right. There's no honor among thieves.
Yeah, no.
No, there is, and that one of the more common attack vectors is to kick somebody when they're down. When they've been, that when somebody finds out somebody's got a weakness, there's a line forming to go, take care of it. Kind of like that line in the movie Airplane.
But I think what we're saying is,
what was the line in the movie Airplane, Lee?
Remember
Don't
when they
call
were
me
all
Shirley.
coming to beat some sense into that woman?
yes. Striker. That was a different scene. So,
My name's
what was I going to say now? Now I'm thinking of the movie Airplane. Oh, so this doesn't mean if you're a hospital, you can be like, oh, we don't have to put
Free pass.
ransomware. Like ransomware gangs, they have a code of ethics. Like we're totally
No,
safe.
that one ransomware
Yeah,
gang.
like, please
has
don't think
alleged
that.
code of ethics.
Please don't think that. These are awful criminals, and their level of awfulness is going to vary. And it doesn't matter who you are. You could be a victim.
And arguably, it maybe even come down to not how awful they are, and it may be just a crime of opportunity as opposed to a crime of
yeah.
Intent.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, it could be like, oh, that's really bad. Like, give them the decryption key and move on, right? Like, so they did have some honor, or they just didn't want the.
Or we sent this out to a bunch of folks and we didn't know who we were going to send it to, and we got results. And hey, hospital, cool.
Yeah, or not cool. Pull it because we don't want the extra attention because we're gonna anger a lot of people, and we're gonna have the feds after us in some capacity, and we don't want that extra attention because that could lead to people looking into our business. Which is probably more likely the case,
right, Tyler?
Than the ethical, right, Tyler?
Don't bring that down on us.
Yeah, we don't want to be the ones that attack the kids' hospital because that's going to piss off a lot of people who want to take us down. So don't do that. So,
so you mentioned my number one. The reason I brought Southwest in here is because
talk about Southwest.
What I was hearing is that we had all the bad weather and they had the cancellations, but I also hear their IT was antiquated and their IT staff is IT's understaffed, historical, not just now, but that's been a common theme. And I thought, well, they don't have HA, and they don't. They have manual failover. And suddenly that moves this right into a conversation in our wheelhouse because we know that failover and keeping things current, patched, updated is a pain in the ass. And if you deliberately understaff it, bad things happen. Well, here we go. Mm-hmm. This might not be a bad scenario to take to the board when you're trying to pitch doing the right thing. But that's what I was thinking.
Never let a good crisis go to waste to get more resources.
Correct.
And well, I was trying to fly last week and got caught up in the debacle.
Hopefully it was fly out, not home.
Well, and the only reason I was trying to fly between Christmas and New Year's was I needed 2 more legs to maintain my status. And my flight got canceled because they were totally hosed for days, and it was clearly the weather caused it, but it was clearly IT issues. That was, I was trying to just like reschedule the flight, book the cancel the flight, book a new flight, and their apps and their online sites were just, the whole thing was hosed. And it was like, I'm like, okay, I'll try again tomorrow. Maybe that'll happen. They very fortunately, I had finally managed to reschedule a flight. I was going to, on the 31st, on New Year's Eve, I was going to fly to Raleigh, North Carolina and spend 2 hours and fly back. Mm-hmm. And I was supposed to be like leaving at 8:15. So I woke up at like 6 a.m. and I'm like, oh, my flight's delayed. and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. First flight of the day. And I'm like, I'm using FlightAware to try to find out where the plane is. And my plane that was supposed to be in Baltimore was stuck in Florida, and it was flight crew issue or something. There was no weather. But I also happened to get an email that day saying, oh, because we know a lot of people are trying to fly to keep their status, we're going to give you an extra month, so you have until January 31st to maintain your status. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go to Raleigh anymore, so I just canceled the flight. But and I actually got an email yesterday from the CEO. Sorry for your troubles. And I don't know if they sent this to everybody or just because I had a flight.
Status,
but they threw 25,000 points at me. So that's usually one flight. To not an exotic place. So I don't know how much they're taking it on the chin, trying to. I was at home, and all I needed to do was just get one more flight, go somewhere, and fly back. I was originally going to visit my buddy in New York, and had to cancel that because the flight got canceled. And then I was just going to do it just to slip it in under the wire. Even having the email saying we give you another month, I'm like, I should just get it out of the way.
Yeah.
But because you never know. But they as someone who I've been flying Southwest for quite a long time, apparently, because it's Baltimore's a hub. They definitely have had issues, and it was definitely an IT problem, which makes me wonder, if people cut corners in IT, very, very often that means their security isn't up to snuff. So I wonder why they, haven't had more of an issue. But again, what's the opportunity for bad guys to exploit it? Is there an 11-year-old out there that's flying for free because he figured out how to exploit the Southwest app or something like that? Anyway, I don't know.
Well, actually, that 11-year-old is currently occupied on Roblox, so it's okay.
Right.
He's making a fortune on Roblox.
Yeah, $10,000 a month. Like, phew.
And Roblox gets 30% of that.
Yeah, no wonder why they don't want to get in.
Anyway, but that's the whole reason I put that story in there, and that was the conversation.
Yeah, hearing lots of tech debt at Southwest for a long time, and I think one of the other ones too is that their model of lots of direct flights really puts them at a disadvantage as opposed to using the hub and spoke stuff there, because just a little bit of screw up causes major cascades.
Well, yeah, and I've experienced that many times. Weather's great where I am and where I'm going, but wherever the incoming flight the plane that I'm supposed to be getting on is coming from someplace that's having but that's true of a lot of airlines. It's interesting, because Southwest is different. They don't have seating charts. You have to get your boarding pass, 24 hours ahead of time. You got to click on it's like getting tickets for ShmooCon. You got to be right there and hit the thing. Otherwise you're in the C group. And the only reason I went the A list is because I want to be able to get on the plane early enough that I can get overhead luggage storage.
Yep. And if you have status, you get checked in automatically.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about it. And so it's worth it.
Yeah.
And they were, I didn't fly a whole lot in 2020. And I didn't fly a whole lot in 2021, and they extended the status, and I had I had all sorts of flights planned for 2020 that I had to cancel because we, for some reason, the world shut down. So they were good in a lot of ways, but this was like the perfect storm for them. That something was exposed that other airlines were recovering from, and they didn't. I find it interesting, and I don't know if there's a security angle to it or not, but I find it interesting just because I happen to be a consumer of Southwest. Maybe we should find somebody that works at Southwest and try to get them on the show sometime.
Pretty a little busy right now.
They might be a little busy. They are a little bit busy right now.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Jeff. As a consumer, I want them to do better. Because I love the Southwest. It's just so simple to use. You get status, you get that pre-check, and you want it, you can just buy it. You don't have to be some super elite. And hell, used to be, I don't know if you remember the plastic boarding cars for Southwest they used to have. And you'd show up and check in at the counter, and they were given out in the order you arrived at the counter to check in. For a long time, they actually had those as their failover for if their electronic boarding system failed. They still had about piles of them. I don't think they do anymore.
Maybe they should.
But somebody on Discord, that joined the show just in the last 10 or 15 minutes, they're like, "What's the PCI count?" And I'm like, we haven't even talked about PCI on air yet.
Wow.
I have done PCI assessments for airports, and members of my team have done PCI assessments for airlines, especially I know that. What's been particularly interesting, and I don't remember which airport it is, but when there's a common use kiosk where you can go up and usually smaller regional airports, what airline are you flying? And you select the airline, and then you can get your boarding pass. Back in the days when you had to get your boarding pass at a kiosk. And, do you want an upgrade? Do you want to change things? We need to pay for it, insert a credit card. So there is this is a stretch, I realize, but I had to bring up PCI because somebody asked for it. So PCI is a thing at airports.
Lee, I want to talk about your story number 2 quick, the Linux kernel 5.15 vulnerability.
Because Linux.
Yeah.
That was also your 11.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Well, I believe it was. I think it was Johannes in the Sans News Bites. Like, this isn't enabled by default, and 5.15, like, not total. You got to be Ubuntu 2204. But bad, because it's remote code execution. If you have it, you definitely want to patch it.
Yeah. And the fact that they're putting an SMB accelerator in the kernel, I mean, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And terrifying at the same time.
Terrifying, but because Adrian was talking about, I think a talk that Robert Graham gave a while ago about how in user mode you can be just as performant as in kernel in a lot of applications. And so, like, I don't understand the design decision behind putting Samba hooks inside the kernel. Is that really a thing today? Like, do we really need that? So it is an in-kernel SMB server designed to augment Samba, conceivably to make it faster. Like, does it really make it faster?
And arguably, why do we need to do this? Well, if you want to be a competitor to Microsoft in the server market, I mean, I can remember back to a job not all that long ago, which was also really long ago, and that I was responsible for dealing with a network that was Active Directory, and it was Samba on Linux tied to NIS Plus. Talk about a nightmare, but it worked.
Did it even work?
Yep. It worked. And every time you wanted to add a user, you were jumping through hoops to add users. But once it worked, it worked great. And this organization with like 500 desktops, their desktops never knew the difference. But it took some getting there.
Good for them.
Yeah. Well, the scariest part was NIS Plus.
Yes. It's scary.
Yeah.
It's old.
Yeah. It wasn't scary.
No,
it was easy to use. It was lucrative.
I started with NIS. I skipped NIS Plus. NIS had some interesting security holes. But let's not go there. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
Yeah. It could have been NIS tied to YP, and then you'd be all set, right?
Yeah. So I actually was thinking of Larry with my number 3 story. I know that's one of those right to repair bills that, you don't have to go to the factory to get things repaired, and they should be giving you the same tools. So it's apparently the first in the nation.
Awesome.
But they kind of watered it down. They said, well, only devices after, I think, June of 23. And there's a bunch of other stuff they did because they were worried that, life safety and type of stuff. And I'm thinking it'd be interesting to see what the next one does. If they allow more flexibility, or they keep this tight, tie with the manufacturer for most repairs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like I said, I thought Larry might have the response here.
The protection from injury, like, I have to send this back to the manufacturer so that they can fix it so that I'm not at risk of injury? Or is the injury, if I repair it myself, I could suffer an injury?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I wasn't sure quite.
Turn your smartphone into a flamethrower? I mean, what is it?
Well, I'm more thinking of my son was looking into the automotive programs, and I think it was actually I don't know if it was me or someone else asked about electric vehicles, and he's like, super dangerous.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably don't want students like messing around. He's like, you have to go get a special certification.
Yep.
Because if you make a mistake, you could die because of the electrical charge. Right?
I mean, you could die and you could burn the damn vehicle, go down, and then there's all sorts of other problems.
Right, but do I have to go work for Toyota to get the Toyota certification
so I can fix my own
Toyotas, or could I do that independently?
Yep. And I think that if there's a potential life safety issue, maybe you have to send it back. And there's probably I would venture to guess they're probably going to define that with some extreme examples. I think the other one too is that potentially protecting the manufacturers from liability.
Mm-hmm.
That if there is a potential life safety issues and you repair this yourself,
right,
and a life safety issue happens, the manufacturer cannot be liable if you fixed it yourself.
Right.
Good point.
Yep. And
that's a great point.
You know, I'm a huge proponent, and I'm with Jack Daniel on this one about the right to repair, and it absolutely comes to some recent stuff in memory. I did some work through SANS for IoT hacking through a specific, very large, heavy equipment manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
And my opinion, they're taking a pretty good stance for what limited opportunities that I observed. But we, my wife and I are huge fans of the show Gold Rush. And the episode we watched last week where they had one of their excavators break down because it's controlled by a little computer, and they couldn't fix it unless they had a certified technician come out with the certified technician laptop to basically go boop, 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 unlock this thing. And it shut down their entire operation for days, weeks, months, because they're in the remote Yukon to get a technician out there to go boop, boop, boop. And there's
in the meantime, they played Doom on it.
No, they couldn't.
Yeah, they probably would have fixed it if they could do that, right?
And there were things that they could do to bypass it, but they got to the point where the bypasses no longer could bypass the thing that was quote broken, and it was like a faulty sensor. And you can either bypass the sensor or you can get a new sensor, and either way, it was going to shut down your operation for weeks, and you're going to lose millions of dollars.
Maybe they should have just...
These are like $500,000 combine kind of pricing. These aren't something you just go out and buy another one.
Oh yeah, no, like one of the in two different camps in the show Gold Rush, they have pieces of heavy equipment through various manufacturers that used were over $1 million. A $1 million dump truck and $1 million excavator used.
I mean, maybe they should have just done what my coworker Mickey, who's awesome, put on Twitter,
which is
scrape the sock to expose the JTAG pads.
Oh my god!
Oh my god! Is that this wasn't
nice segue?
At first, I thought it was Mickey's video because Mickey's done some pretty cool videos. I was like, wow, Mickey's some really interesting editing and
this?
Put it on. I'm like, oh, it wasn't me. It was Mickey found this video and posted it. But
this is a whole new level of dedication. Like normally to go and tinker with firmware and that type of stuff, you need one of the ways is JTAG, the Joint Test Action Group, which is not named for the specifications. The group that defines the specifications.
Right. Yeah, it's really weird. Yeah.
You're looking for exposed ports on the board. And in this case, the board didn't expose the ports, and the connectors weren't. The JTAG was not available on the pins on the system on a chip, but they were available internal to the chip. So under magnification, they took and scraped off the plastic on the outside to reveal the die underneath, and then soldered on these wires to these connectors that are about as fine as a human hair.
Oh, like amazing. What was the it was like a green silicone they used to glue down the leads to hold them in place. Is that what
something
was
like
doing?
That. Yeah. And this is on, for the record, this is on, it looks like a Qualcomm CPU that they're doing it on.
Which
they're literally using a pointed needle probe to scrape down the outer epoxy plastic on this device to expose the die underneath to get access to these pads to... Jeez.
Amazing.
It's like, and how much recon did they have to do to figure out where they were in there? I was like, this is a really cool video to watch.
Yeah. I mean, it's time lapse.
I wonder which Qualcomm chip that was. They just had some Qualcomms. I didn't get a chance to add it. They had a slew of vulnerabilities. that were reported actually in their UEFI.
It looks like a Qualcomm SM7 125.
Yeah, I don't recall which one that is, but So I was doing this research today where there was vulnerabilities that were discovered by Binnerly that had to do with UEFI on ARM chips that were many of them made by Qualcomm. And when you looked at their advisories, so they haven't published the full details yet, but when you looked at their advisories, it said that it affected these devices. And when I Googled just like random, there was really long list of devices. It had to be 40 devices that were impacted. And some of them were used in like USB audio stuff or audio DACs and Bluetooth headphones. And some of them were ARM socks that were used on laptops as well. So it's like runs the gamut. It could be your USB-C audio DAC dongle that has an ARM Qualcomm chip on it that had the vulnerability, or it could be all the way up to your laptop running on an ARM chip that's a Qualcomm Snapdragon is one of their ARM lines.
Yep. I mean, your laptop arguably will be probably much more limited for ARM stuff, but
right. Yes. Yeah. Not as many ARM based.
But you think ARM Qualcomm, and the first thing that comes to mind for me is Android. Yeah, or Android tablets, phones.
Yep.
Like
those were on the list too. There was phones. Yeah, chips using phones.
And we were having a discussion at work today, like how ubiquitous Android is across, because it's free across so many IoT devices, like Peloton.
Yeah, a lot of your
Android.
A lot of your home smart gym equipment is Android. My treadmill at home is Android.
Yep, exactly. We were having the discussion, like, I wish I could just, the screen on my Peloton treadmill is freaking huge.
Yeah.
I don't want to watch their crappy stuff. Like, why can't I jailbreak this and put the Nessun app on it so I can watch the football game while I'm on the treadmill? Like,
right.
No.
I mean, you can.
You can. Of course you can. Of course you can. But what? I mean, honestly, Peloton would be smart and make some more money by releasing an app that they go through their app store to buy that, so you can watch the football game while you're on your treadmill.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, I would pay to have that app to access even though there's services that I already could get for free, like the Disney Plus app or my Paramount Plus app to get on a treadmill. I'd go watch shows while I'm on the treadmill.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, are you talking American football or European or the rest of the world football, Larry?
What's that? Hand egg or football?
Is he watching football or football?
Hand egg or football?
Rest of the world football or American football?
Football American.
So,
football.
Do you have a beer in your hand while you're on your Peloton bike?
Duh.
Everybody drinks, light beer from Miller on.
No, that American beer is like sex in a canoe. It's fucking close to water.
Why did it change?
Look at Tyler's face.
But speaking of devices,
and now's the time to remind you, my granddaughter's watching.
Hey,
Larry,
she needs to learn about beer.
yes, she does.
There's a
good beer.
There's a vulnerability in the Common Network Code for Nintendo games.
Oh yeah,
Nintendo 3DS remote code execution by having an online game with them. So the online gaming component. There's a basically
which story is of this?
My story number 8.
Okay.
Classic buffer overflow.
ENL buffer pwn.
Yep. Buffer overflow contains 2 methods, add and set, which fill a network buffer data with data coming from other players. And since it's controlled by the other players, classic buffer overflow and remote code execution. It's been patched too. Nintendo actually patched it.
Yeah, they did. There was a bunch of games for this, and I think it was not just on the 3DS. There were a couple of other platforms that it worked on as well.
So Mario Kart 7, 8, 8 Deluxe, Animal Crossing. You mentioned Animal Crossing.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
It looks like it is the 3DS as opposed to. I thought some of them were into the Switch as well, but it looks like I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's just a 3DS.
No, all the Switch and 3DS games listed have received updates that patch the vulnerabilities.
So it was a Switch too.
Yep. And that's the 3DS is obviously the older platform. The Switch is their current modern platform, which is,
which you should just get a Steam Deck at this point. I want one.
I mean, depends on what you want it for, right?
Well, it runs Linux, so
my kids could give two shits about a Steam Deck. They love their
they
Switch.
give two shits that it runs Linux.
Right.
I had this conversation with my kids. I'm like, but God, this runs Arch Linux. They're like,
can I play games on it?
really?
Can I do Mario Kart?
Dad, you're such a nerd. Buy one for yourself.
Yep.
I'm like, you guys want this for Christmas? They're like, no, not actually. No.
Dad, you want that for Christmas?
Right.
You want that for
Dad,
me?
we want what the cool kids are getting.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
I think that was my last story.
I think we should wrap up unless Larry's got one.
The only other one that I had, which was related to some ransomware stuff, was a local one for us. Is that ransomware attacks have hit community college and a school district in Massachusetts, causing the schools to have to close. Specifically, Swansea, Massachusetts school district had to close school because their computers got ransomware.
Oops.
And the kids can't go to school because the computers don't work? Like, do they need a computer to tell the buses when they need to leave the yard to pick up the kids to drop them off at the school?
This is mass. It's the yard.
Right. do the kids know what classes they need to go to? Because they've been going to them for a couple of months already. And are the teachers that reliant on the computers in their classroom to teach the class that they can't come pull something out of their ass for 3 days?
No, Larry, we can't ring the bells for the schedule without the computer.
But can the principal look at their watch and get on the intercom, which is probably analog, and say, it's time to change classes now, kids?
Oh, I'm sorry. The principal's out sick.
Fuck.
I know. I'm with you, Larry. Like, what the hell? Where's the manual method?
I mean, holy shit. We went to school, like, with a foot of snow on the ground, and we carried our books in a belt with no shoes and walked uphill both ways. Like,
the schedule was printed and it was on the wall in the classroom, and you looked at the freaking clock. My high school didn't use bells at all.
But this is a college. No,
Swansea High School and elementary schools.
Okay, we're also. I got you. Okay,
right. Yeah. So I mean, and they had the simplex system that tied the clock, so they were all reasonably synchronized. But even so, you can look at your watch or phone and know what time it is. Pretty accurate.
Swansea School was closed for primary and secondary students because the district's internet network was being held ransom.
Mm-hmm. I mean, some of the classes would probably not work. You probably wouldn't be able to teach the computer classes.
Agreed.
But so what? You got how much more? What higher percentage of the curriculum is left? I mean, you could do fine.
Yeah, I mean, my kids do a lot of their older ones, even in elementary school, do their assignments on the Chromebook.
Yep.
But I mean, to Larry and Lee's point, right? Like that, you could supplement.
Yeah, you do something else for the day or 2 days. I mean,
it's all kinds of ways to learn without a computer.
Yeah.
So actually, piling on a little bit, and I don't have a story for this, but a lot of the newer things I'm seeing when it comes to fill in the blank, shut down with ransomware is now starting to be followed back by executed predefined plan for recovery. In other words, they're no longer, they're scrambling to figure out what a lot of more organizations, when they are getting knocked down, they've already gone through the planning and things to execute a very smooth recovery, which I think is a good trend in the last couple of years. It's really nice to see that people are thinking it out and they have a DR plan and it works. Yeah, it sucks that they got in trouble, but hey, they had a plan and they're using it.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think the school had a plan.
The plan should be get all students and teachers involved in incident response. Let's go.
Yep.
Let's go, team.
So, arguably, the tweets from the the Swansea, Massachusetts superintendent was the cybersecurity company with whom we contract is working today to ascertain the extent of the attack on our network. More info will be shared once we have a clearer picture. But it's my experience, if you were asked, the cybersecurity company with whom we contract is probably the folks that do their local on-the-ground computer support, which are not likely cybersecurity folks.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. But
Highly speculative.
yeah, agreed.
Hey, I've got one story that I suck and I didn't put it in the show notes, but I put it on Slack. I'll drop it in Discord. It's something a colleague posted, but apparently somebody in Switzerland is talking about cyber insurance and saying that cyber attacks are becoming so ubiquitous, if I could use that word, that they're thinking they're not going to be insurable anymore. Which is interesting because I think the early days of cyber insurance was just a money grub for insurance companies to say, oh, let's just tack on a cyber rider and we'll make that much more money. And then, in the last year or two or three, I forget how long it was, where there was actually, people trying to file claims and then, and what's the term?
Actuarial?
What's the term? Actuarial. Nobody had the really good actuarial tables, but it's kind of like, flood insurance when you're living on, next to water. Most people don't have that because it's so freaking expensive. Because of course it's going to flood. I don't know if cyber
it's the first
insurance
2 years they've lost money. That's why it's a problem. It's the first 2 years they've lost money.
Insurance companies do this stuff because it's a way to make money, but if they have to pay out too much, then it's not a moneymaker, so they're not going to do it. So, which isn't necessarily a good or bad thing, because I've known a lot of companies are like, why do we bother spending all this money on security? We'll just get a good insurance policy and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And now they're not going to cyber insure them anymore, so now they got to spend the money on the security stuff. Way too late in the game. Not. Or potentially too late in the game. Yep.
It's an interesting. I mean, if you look at it strictly from an economic perspective, what's the most economic? What's the best use of your limited financial resources? Do you pay for security, pay for compliance, pay for coffee? Get a rider on your insurance policy that says cyber, and so it must protect you from everything.
Right.
Thoughts?
So, I
think it's just it's good business. Right? We're at that point.
Lee?
I was reading a story about there was a company that was trying to get a claim from 2019 on their cyber insurance. They got ransomware, but their claim was only going to cover physical impact, and they tried to claim that the loss of a few thumb drives and some other things were, and basically they lost their case because they didn't have the right kind of cyber insurance. I mean, it's getting to the point where you really need a real lawyer to look at your cyber insurance before you get it. Because
not a fake lawyer.
You need a cyber lawyer.
Tyler.
Right. Not somebody who plays one on TV.
Tyler?
Right. Certainly not somebody like me.
Tyler.
I know a lawyer.
Tyler.
I wouldn't try and be with
Tyler.
No, I mean, that's spot on. It's just good business. We're at that point where good companies are going to either spend the money on cyber insurance, or the fact that cyber insurance is losing money, they've gotten serious and they're actually taking this serious and they're doing good things for the industry. So I think it's good in both sense, forces companies to do things, and cyber insurance is the only people that could actually force it, because you can't operate doing business without that kind of coverage. So they're one of the few places other than compliance that forces this issue, and I think anything that we can improve is going to be good. So it's unfortunate that we've gotten to this point, but that's where we're at.
Yep.
I think you just gave props to PCI. If I heard you correctly.
I may have.
With that, what do you think, Paul?
Yeah, let's wrap this up.
Let's wrap it.
Thanks everyone for listening and watching to this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. See you next time. Larry, take us out.
over and